And the third would be innovations and partnerships for transformation. I really believe in partnerships because as we move, we need to move with everyone alongside. So, before I jump into it, I can see that people are getting settled. I would want everyone to get settled, get relaxed, listen to the inputs and the perspectives of our panelists and what they would like to share with us, and how best we all, as women, as men, can take from this source of wisdom that is going to be here today. So it's going to be an amazing session. And we have, yes, we're talking about gender, but I do love that a man is on the panel as well. So that, yeah, we have a man on the panel as well, so that we can have some balance in there, so that he can also share his perspective from that level. So let me quickly move right into it. I'd like to introduce my very first panelist, who is in the person of, should I do a ladies first? No. Ladies first. Oh, that's a good one. Okay, so I would like to first jump into welcoming my very first panelist, who is from Wukan. And I really love the fact that they invest in women and in agriculture for both men and women. So it's really amazing. And I'd like to read a little bit about her so that we can get an overview of who she is and a hang of who she is. Yeah. So she's none other than Miss Jeanette Gorong, who is the founder and executive director of Wukan. And not only that, they've been able to do so many projects in agriculture, spanning across the world. So I'd like to invite to the stage quickly so that we can zoom right into it. Ms. Jeanette Gorong, please take a seat to my left. Thank you. And I'd like to go straight into inviting the project manager himself, Mr. Bronson Eranoga. Yeah, I hope I got it right. I hope I got it right. Yeah. And last but not the least, yes, we need a global sustainability and policy manager expert to come and tell us what the global stage is thinking on this very topic. So I'd like to invite Emance Rizet also. Yeah. Thank you. Let me join you on the stage so that we can take some center on this. Thank you. Okay, so for our very first team, like I introduced, we are talking about redesigning the food supply chains for gender. And we have about 15 minutes to do this quickly, so I'll just go straight into it. So we are looking at how food supply chains can be gender responsive and climate resilience. So I'd first like to take it off with Jeanette. Since you deal more with women at the local level, how do you think women play a really strong role in supply chain resilience from production to retail? I'd like you to talk about that.
Okay, thank you very much for, first of all, WOCAN stands for Women Organizing for Change in Agriculture and Natural Resource Management. We're a not-for-profit, we're about 21 years old. We're a network of women and men across the world who are, first and foremost, we're foresters, we're agronomists, we're livestock experts, who come at the gender question from a technical understanding of what that means. I'm going to talk about a couple of things, but first and foremost, I want to say that the farmers of the world are women, by large majority. And yet, I think we still all have a sense that a farmer is a man and the woman is his helper, and that is not what the statistics show. So basically, for us, everything comes from putting women at the center, women farmers at the center. We cannot design projects and all kinds of things that do not understand the types of unique challenges that women farmers face. They do not have the same access to finance, to land tenure, to resources, to extension, etc. So as we talk about women becoming key to the resilience and the adaptation in the supply chain, we have to start with where they are at and understand the realities. I would say that's the first thing. So we designed what we call the W Plus standard. We are the only standard certification system in the world that measures, quantifies, and monetizes women's empowerment results at the project level. So what does this mean? So if you're familiar with carbon standards, you know that this is a market-based mechanism that is measuring outcomes, in this case environmental outcomes for carbon. So, and then using that market system to channel new capital to support projects that have good results, right? So we looked at that, we were inspired by this, and we thought, could we design a framework that would not measure carbon, but would do the same thing for women's empowerment and gender equality? So we built the W Plus standard, listening to women in Kenya and women in Nepal who we were working with, and we said, what is women's empowerment? What matters to you? What do we measure? They gave us 6 categories of indicators. It's not only income, that's important, but women also value time saving, and knowledge and education, health, and agriculture, food security, and leadership. And so that's what women themselves said, that's what defines empowerment to us. So we built a framework that took qualitative and quantitative indicators for those 6 areas, right? So what we're doing is projects use the W Plus standard and they choose at least one of those categories, we call domains, that are fit to the type of project or value chain, supply chain, that suits whatever impacts are being generated. We measure, and we measure baseline. We measure a later point after there have been some activities that have increased their women's empowerment. And then we generate a credit. We call it the W Plus credit. So a W Plus credit is, one credit is equal to a 10% change in the life of a woman from baseline situation to result situation, right? And so those credits are then marketed, sold. So it's a challenge to build a market around a social impact credit. But here's what's unique to us. We believe very strongly in, I would say, the under-recognized, hugely underfunded role that women's cooperatives, women's organizations, not necessarily only in agriculture, but certainly in agriculture, and the role they can play in climate mitigation as well as climate adaptation. However, like I said, they have no money. The amount of funding that goes to women's organizations out of climate finance is 0.01%. Ouch. That's unbelievable, right? So we're a firm believer, if we can bring cash to these women's organizations and get them to determine how to best use that cash to meet their own needs for climate adaptation. So the W Plus standard requires a benefit sharing mechanism. So for every W Plus credit that's sold, at least 20% has to go as a cash transfer to the women's organization for them to use as they see best fit. Again, putting them at the center, and then they use that for climate adaptation purposes. Shall I stop there?
All right. Yeah, Jeanette, thank you so much. That's a good take, because when you look at the statistics at the Global South, it shows that 40 to 60% of the workforce are women in agri. Yeah, it's more than that. Oh, thank you. So, since we have a policy expert here, I have a policy question. I'd like to know, what lessons can we draw from... Oh, sorry, I'll take that again. Yeah, I'd like to know, what lessons can we draw from successful women-led climate-smart supply chains? I'd like to know, in your own perspective, how can we draw some lessons from this very sensitive topic?
Hi everyone, Hermance. I work in the Global Public Affairs team of Danone. We are a global food and beverage company. We do yogurts, water, and also some specialized medical nutrition. So I am not, unfortunately, the expert on women empowerment. We have an internal expert dedicated to this at Danone, who is very passionate, and I would love for her to be here. And Jeanette, I will probably give you her contact. But I still wanted to attend this event because it's an important topic for us at Danone. Actually, we were at the last Climate Week in 2024, so last year, we were at the opening of the FAO Commit to Equality event where our CSO was actually doing the opening speech, so for sure a very important topic. And also, of course, as a woman working in sustainability in an agri-food company, I felt it was important to reply by a yes to this invite, so thank you again for inviting me. Before coming here and talking about this topic, I read the last FAO report on women in agricultural supply chain, which I would encourage everybody here to read if you are interested in the topic. I think it has some very interesting data, and notably a lot that was already said about the fact that women represent more than half of the agricultural workforce. They are very central to this industry, and yet in a lot of moments they're kind of invisibilized. They earn less than men, they have less access to land, and also in general we've noticed that they are less, I mean the farms in which they are less productive than men, and this is not because women are less efficient, but it's because they have less access to training, to technology, and they also have more time to dedicate inside the house with the children, etc. So it's hard, it's a tough life for women. And so I will speak about what we've been doing a little bit at Danone. We're at the very beginning of this journey, but what I've been saying now is something that we've noticed on the ground. And so as part of our project, we have indeed tried to include the gender lens to empower women. And what is very interesting is that we've seen that when we empower women, there is not, it's not only a question of responsibility, but it's also a question of business, and it improves the resilience of our business. So in Egypt, for example, we have a project where we invested in women training, and as a result, we've had like 8,000 women trained, which led to a doubling of the productivity of cows. And what is really interesting and being said in the FAO report is that when you invest in women, they give back a lot to the community. And as a result of this, there were like 27,000 families around the farms that benefited positively from our investments in these women. Thank you.
Thank you too. That was very valuable and an interesting take. I like that you mentioned a report in there and the case study. It kind of syncs with the other. I'd like to get that report, by the way, when we are done. Yeah. So I'd like to ask, Bronson, do you think gender-sensitive policies support inclusive participation in agricultural trade and logistics from your perspective?
Yeah, it's an honor for us to be here. Thank you very much for that. And being the only gentleman, as you said, in the panel. So one of the key things actually about policies, especially in the developing countries, we work across Africa in multiple countries at the Source Plus, to both West, South, and East. There's one key thing we sometimes have problem with the government. We have good policies. Anybody from, especially African continent, can tell you that. But the tough part is always implementation part. And as an organization, we saw that was a challenge. And what we've been trying to do is we have to be objective in everything we're doing, in including, to make sure we have inclusivity among the women in the society. And you also have some tough dynamics within different cultural. I could mention something like Fulani in Nigeria and the Maasai in East Africa, the Xhosa in South Africa. There's interesting dynamic. As much as you would want to engage this community in terms of activities, or especially the women, to empower them, but the ultimate decisions always lie with the elderly women within the society. And what do? You have now to teach the objectivity within the society, enlighten the community about objectivity. Yes, we have the policy about we need like a third of women, for example. But what are you doing about it? If you don't make the objective of making sure you have that matching number, it's not going to happen. And so some dynamics we've been able to move around from our perspective. because sometimes also gender is misunderstood. It's both men and women, so just only women. But what we tend to do is we educate the men in the society to understand why we need to empower those women. Because sometimes they hold the ultimate decision, especially land, which you mentioned. I mean, it's interesting, over 90% of farmers in Africa are women, but over 90% of the land they farm is owned by men. So that's an interesting dynamic. But until you educate these men how important this land is, when it's in ownership of women, they'll never come to an understanding on that objectiveness within the society. We have some other aspect where they will think you're competing among the society, and you have to make it that clarity out there, clear and loud, and to communicate why is it important we have this. So, and that's the key thing again. We've been trying to pass across the continents in the governments we work with at the national level and also state or local level, county levels, to make sure they understand. I mean, when we talk about this, also we need to educate also the men in the society. I mean, I was educated what is the importance of empowering women in the society, and that's why I actually decided to come on board and run with it and see how we could educate the rest. But until we understand that notion, sometimes we might think it's a competition, and it's not. So thank you. I'll rest there.
Thank you very much. That was a good input. Based off on that, I would like to hear case studies around the world from Jeanette's perspective. I'd like to hear around the world, what are some case studies, successful case studies, that you think women have led the initiative when it comes to women-led climate smart supply chains, in your perspective?
Oh, that's a really good question. I wish I could. I don't have the names of companies or I want to talk a minute. It's not necessarily agriculture, but I had the opportunity to visit an Amazon community, and I was invited by Natura, which is a local Brazilian company that has lotions. All of us in our bags got this shampoo and conditioner. That's actually from Natura. Natura sources its products for its lotions from cooperatives around the Amazon rainforest. And so I got to visit those. And those are led by women in a lot of the situation. The harvesting is done by women. And then the company works very closely with women in these communities to build their capacities for leadership, for example. I think that's a good example. And I also think, as a consumer, I'm not a company like you are at Danone, but as a consumer, I know I want to buy products that I know will support women in the supply chain, right? And I am waiting to see all the companies start to put a brand on this that tells the story, like Natura, of how you buy a Natura product and it supports women's empowerment. I have yet to see this. I keep telling people I pay extra for a product that has a frog on it. Happy to do so. I pay more for a frog because I know it supports a forest community, right? Why isn't there a trademark? I mean, W Plus could do it onto a product, so as a consumer, I know where my money is going. So I put that out there as a challenge to the supply chains to think about the consumer interest to support the good things in the world.
It's really very important that you noted consumer interest in there, because when we want to actually do this, women form the community most often, and they are the center and the heart of it. So it's really important to take them along. You just can't leave them behind on this journey. And based off on that, I would like to know, in all of this, there's a mix also of gaps. There are gaps in there. As we fight for the greater good, definitely we'll get some limitations in there. So I'd like to come back to you, Emant. How do you address gaps in land, in credit, technology? How do you think this affects women's roles in supply chains, speaking from a global perspective or from a global standpoint? How do you think women are affected by this in terms of land, in terms of technology, credit?
Thanks. So I think we've already outlined all of the challenges that women were facing, so on not being able to buy land, access to credit, have proper training, etc. what we do as a company is that when we invest in, so the goal of Danone is to invest in projects with our farmers that will help them not only have a better impact on the planet, but also improve their livelihood. Because essentially that's what everybody wants, is to have like farmers who can have a better life. And this goes by having cows, notably, that are more productive. And how do you ensure that those cows are more productive is that time of the day. Is by investing in women, because what we've noticed that women are the people who, within the farm, take more time to take care of the cows. So in many countries, women spend like 6 to 7 hours with the cows, when men spend like 2 to 3 hours. And so when you ensure that women are well trained, that you explain to them the technology, then they take better care of the cows, and so you have better milk. And I think it was mentioned right before, what is really interesting as well is understanding the cultural norms of the countries you are in, because, I mean, as you said, you have to explain to men as well that it's not necessarily, and this is for everything I think when it comes to women in the workplace, etc., it's explaining that it's not like taking a part of the pie, but it's a win-win situation. It's about growing the pie. So this is a big part of what we do, and we have so pilot projects around this in, so I mentioned Egypt, in Morocco, and in India as well, where we are starting to really ensure that when we do agricultural projects to empower farmers as a whole, there is like a gender lens to it.
That's a very good take. That's a very good take. I like that you said it's a win-win situation. So there's no loss in there. No one feels that they are being exploited or they are being used for the benefits of others. So let's look at this from another perspective. As we create the opportunities, as we create the option for them, the opportunity for them to shine, let's also look at the regulatory framework in there, because we need government backing on this. So I'd like to come to you, Bronson. How do you think regulatory reforms are most effective, from where you sit, in closing the gender gap in food systems?
So one of the major things we have is data. I think that we have a lot of data, but sometimes formulation is not around the data we have across the world. It's a key thing. And my colleagues here might have data, you have their own data, I have my own data, you have their own data, but it's not much anywhere. So we have a scattered pattern like landmark. From the policy perspective, I think my advice would have, we could have a collective one central point where the data is decentralized, where we could always access and see how we could, from the government or national side, or they could make informed policy, and also from the development perspective or side, they could also initiate or implement projects that are more women-oriented or women-tailored to ensure we address the needs. Because sometimes, and as I said, why even other people, we have a lot of information about women, why there is the notion, of course, women need to be empowered. But the why sometimes is the question that people are left in there. Why are you doing it? Why do you have this? Because we miss that data. There's a huge data gap in terms of that. And even as sitting here, I also have my colleagues, both women and men. One of the key things we discuss, actually been discussing throughout COP since we stepped in, he's trying to look for data to understand how he could employ, so they empower the women's society. Likewise for the women here, I think it's one of the key discussion actually that came out. And I thought, yeah, it's quite a key central point. And as you said also, we need to be objective. If governments formulate policies, we need to have them implemented. They are not some papers that are stored somewhere in a desk and not executed. It needs to come to the execution. And of course, with the women themselves involved. Sometimes this is one of the last point actually. We make policies, how could I make a policy that influences you as a woman and I've not put you on the table? Or you go to a panel where you have 20 men with one woman and you're formulating policy about women. Sorry to say, I find that absurd from my side. And those are the key things that need to change. We need to have women sitting on the table, making also their own policies, because I believe you understand yourself more than we do understand you. And that's it for me.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I'd like Jeanette to also add a thing or two to that question. Regulatory reforms, because I'm really happy that Bronson noted that implementation is another problem, because that is where the gap is. We can write policy on policy till the ground. It's not being implemented at the ground level. So what do you think, from where you sit, the experiences you've lived out, how do you think this is relevant to the work you do?
Well, and yeah, exactly. And that's, so we used to think this was a question of capacity building, right? I don't think that anymore. It's not. I mean, WOCAN has done gender mainstreaming capacity building for 30 years, 40 years. I've done it, right? And that's what I said. We realized at some point we can train people until the end of time, but it doesn't bring about a change in the needle. It just doesn't. And so we've got to talk the words of accountability. We have to think of accountability mechanisms. How do we hold people accountable to the policies and even to the claims they make? So you may even see companies, for example, say that they have gender responsive, more than gender sensitive, gender responsive results. But do they? How do we know? How are we measuring? If it's a case of allowing them to self-report, I can tell you in many cases it's a box-checking exercise where I'm not saying a company, but perhaps a standard, and a company that's using a certain reporting mechanism will just self-report and say, yes, we've affected 100% of the women. How do we know that's true? And that's why I will argue for a standard or for a certification process that comes with an independent verification system that says, yes, we went to the ground, we talked to the women farmers, yes, it's true. They have absolutely saved time, they've saved money, they've all those good things, right? So I think accountability is, and I think we need to be brave and bold about this, right? I mean, women's gender disparity has existed for hundreds and thousands of years. I mean, it's, if we just keep going and along with, sorry to maybe be in opposition to my panelists, but if we just go along with the cultures as they already are, women are disadvantaged in every culture of the world, including my own. Let's be truthful about this. So we are not going to achieve gender parity and women's empowerment by just going along with business as usual. It has to be disruptive. Policy has a place, but it has to be held accountable. There have to be accountability mechanisms, and global climate finance mechanisms are a great way to bring about that kind of accountability. Yes, you will receive a grant or concessional finance, but it has certain conditions on it. So I think that's the time of where we are right now.
Yeah, just, can you please give her the mic, Jeanette? Yes. I would want you to highlight, I want to zoom in right to partnerships. How essential are they to where NGOs, cooperatives, the private sector, how do you think they can expand opportunities for women?
Oh, huge opportunity for partnerships. And as a speaker from a women's organization, and I can tell you, I told the amount of funding that women's organizations get, it's nothing. And I still hear women's organizations that could do so much more. And if they don't have partnerships and they're still looking for grants, there are no grants anymore. Come on. The competition for the very small number of grants out there is so high. My organization doesn't even bother to apply. Even we can't get it, right? I don't want to be in competition with my sisters, right? And here's where I think private sector can come in, private sector finance can come in, but there's a whole ecosystem that gets developed, right? And it puts women at the center, and it puts the organizations at the center, because women's organizations can amplify hugely your investments into a community, because they can do so much more than focusing on individual women farmers. And there's a place for private sector, there's a place for agriculture companies, supply chains, private sector investors are looking for this. They're looking for these opportunities to bring money into adaptation and resilience. Maybe they need a return on investment. That's okay. That's possible. These don't need to be grants. I don't think grants are the way to go. And so that's where I think there's huge opportunity for partnership.
That's really amazing. I like that you noted that grants are not a feasible thing. Yes, yes, grants are not a feasible thing. You've been an amazing a group of panelists. I feel like I've left my audience out of the mix. I need to hear from the audience. Does anyone have a question in there? Any question for my amazing panelists? Any question? Oh, any question? No. Oh, I see a hand. Any other hand? We need to hear from you. I love that that's the man who raised his hand. Yeah, okay. So I'd like to give the mic to him. Yeah.
Hi there. Interesting discussion. I'm Omar Saleh from the Netherlands. We are a technology provider. We offer solutions for flood prevention. What we normally do is when we involve women in our projects. And rather than just having a checkbox, okay, we have this number of women, we actually try to put them in positions of decision, like in steering committees. Still, what we struggle with is that we can implement a project, but the land is owned by men. The power structures are owned, is male dominated. So maybe you have some tips for us. If we implement the project, how can we effectively change that part? I know it's a difficult question.
Thank you. Oh, I see another hand. Oh. I'd like you to brood over that question. I'll come back to you.
Thank you so much. My name is Sarah Tosise. I am from the Gambia, a former national youth parliamentarian, and I currently work in an organization called the Woman Bus. I just wanted to ask, in communities where women don't have the right to own a land, and then they don't have access to make agricultural decisions, what do you think are some of the effective strategies that could be used to actually look at the power imbalances that exist? Because I am from an African country, and most of the time there are cultural norms and barriers that do not allow women to access lands, and inheritance becomes a problem. And even at the constitutional level, sometimes you have these existing laws, we have very beautiful laws and policies, but when it comes to the implementation of these policies, we are nowhere. So yeah.
Thank you so much. That was a good question. Emma, I would like to take the first one.
Yes, thanks for the question. I think the two are linked around the power imbalance. I will try to answer as much as I can, even though I'm not the expert, and there are a lot of cultural or like regulatory norms that I might not be aware of. In the case of Danone, I think the power imbalance is something that we've noticed and that we're trying to tackle in the milk area by giving women those power positions, for example, in the milk collection centers, also in like the milk local trade associations. And we've seen that by giving women more power in the community, actually it was improving the resilience of the whole like supply chain. And also linked to that, training women to be trainers is a big, it's a big thing for us, because in some countries actually I've learned that women can train women and men, but men can only train men. So if you train more women, you can train more people overall. So these are a couple of things that we put in place in a very like action-oriented way.
Bronson, can you expand on that?
Yeah, I can expand and I pass to my colleague. So I can relate with you because I come from an indigenous community in Kenya, Maasai, and I say, we have a quite strong culture. Whether you like it or not, whether you put women in power, we have serious women in power in the government, but at the end of the day, decisions are made by around 12 old men in the whole community. It always comes back there. And how do I navigate this? As a youth, of course, I have my place in the society. As a man, sometimes I'm regarded as too important compared to the women. But as I said, you have to be objective. And community or cultural dynamics sometimes are sensitive. And actually, it has made the Maasai community still, they're still behind in terms of development. Because of that, some projects actually comes to a halt. Even national government. You have decision passed with the national government, but when they arrive, I remember we had the East Africa SGR, level line coming in. It stopped there for around 3 months. And that's all made a decision by a few 12 people in the society. And that's the hierarchy. Even if you make women, and this is the interesting thing about our community, I don't know if it's the same. For you as a woman, you can be made a leader in the community. But we have elderly women who have to embrace you. If they don't embrace you, you become an outcast in the society. And when you become an outcast, you cannot influence any decision. So that brings me back to what I was saying. We need to be objective, and you need to involve these men, not in the higher level of implementation. Make them understand what you're really doing. And if you look at our programs, we always work with the communities, but you have like 1 or 2 those elderly men. Just really understand what you're doing. You're not really here preaching anything against them and all that, because those are the thoughts sometimes they would have. Why is he coming, or are they coming to change our norms and all that? But at the end of the day, I mean, it's open up, people are opening up, and you have positive results from our side. As a national government also, it's quite an interesting dynamic. I'd also mention Samburu when you're doing Slam Dam in Rumuruti. Still, we involved women, but we had some dynamics, a few things. Not giving men control, but letting them understand what you're really doing with the women in the community. And with that now, they could leave the project to the community for the women to take it over. I think that's our approach into the most critical, sensitive issues in terms of cultural aspects. But I'll later contribute.
Short words, Jeanette.
Okay. First of all, we also train men. We have a whole, we call it reframing leadership for gender equality, and 1/3 of the trainees are men. And you're right, sometimes those men become completely convinced, but we still don't see the results. So that's what I'm looking for, results, not looking for capacity building. The land tenure question is the hardest one to breach. It's the right question to ask. I am not optimistic, despite all of the policy level attempts to change land ownership for women. I don't think it's going to happen in my lifetime, so I don't know the answer to that. I think we have to keep fighting on that one. But I think in places where women, look, this is not about gender equality. This is about recognizing what you said. 80% of Africa's farmers are women. We're trying to get resources to the farmers. They happen to be women. They happen to be women. Because they're women, we have to pay attention to the special barriers that women face because of gender inequality. This is not about trying to change the society. This is trying to make sure the people who are responsible for growing food are getting the resources they need, right? And in your case, what if those women, I mean, if we could get more funding to women-led cooperatives or organizations, do they have power in that way? I mean, we have to find the spaces where we can overcome these barriers to women not being able to receive. Women are at the front lines of the climate adaptation and agriculture, right? Let's face it. We have to equip them with whatever they need to handle that situation. Whether they're men or monsters or children, it doesn't matter. They're the farmers. We have to meet their needs. That's my just very practical.
Very practical, Jeanette, because this just takes me back to Ghana. When you look at how women produce shea butter in the northern region of Ghana, they go through a lot from farm through to the preparation stage. They have very limited resources, and it takes a lot of work to do that. And so this is just bringing me back to just a project that we want to do on community-led adaptation. where we can integrate some training and capacity building for these women in the northern region of Ghana, because they face the brunt of it. The shea butter we get all over the world, mostly from Ghana, it goes through a lot of processes, a lot of community, a lot of heart, a lot of women who have put so much back into it. So this is really important, and this brings me very much to the next phase of my question about innovations. As we talk about the barriers, the partnerships, all that women go through, let's look at the innovative side on bringing them on board. How do you think, Jeanette, that digital tools is very important that we include digitalization in all of this? How do you think digital tools, data platforms, and financial instruments empower women across supply chains?
Okay, I'm not a great fan of digital. Do you say digitalization?
Sorry?
You're talking about digital. I don't know if it's necessary. I don't know how this is going to really. If the world gets all excited about digitizing this and AI and this, I think about smallholder farmers who are subsistence farmers. Yeah, they probably have a cell phone, but I'm not sure about the digitization, right? I don't think that's any great silver bullet here. I do want to talk about an innovation, which is, so we were working with the Gates Foundation, and one of the interesting things they're coming up with is a way for smallholder women farmers to receive more revenue, is to engage with carbon markets. And so, under carbon markets, you can use a soil carbon methodology. So by increasing the soil health, which is, we all know, is the basis for sustainable agriculture, so by increasing the carbon in soils, you can receive carbon credits that can be sold on the market. You can receive revenue, right? So this is kind of new and innovative, but this would be a way of an additional revenue source to pay farmers for good practices for soil health, while they would get more revenue in the way. So I think that's an example. Is it digitized? No. But it's making use of existing financial market through carbon and building on that, at the same time delivering positive environmental outcomes.
Just to follow up, has this been implemented at your level?
Not yet. But they're going to use our W plus standard, right? So because we can apply our W plus standard on top of a carbon credit. So for a carbon project that has benefits to women, you can get dual certification, you can sell the credits for a higher price, and then, as I said, at least 20% of those revenues go back to the women in the communities.
That's really very essential. It's super important that we find a way to incentivize these people and make sure that they can get some credit for the work they do. So I'd like to come to you, Emance. Yeah, I'd like to know, let's quickly wrap this up. What role can multilateral initiatives and public-private partnerships play in scaling gender-responsive models? How do you think multilateral initiatives and public-private, like a blended finance thing, go hand in hand with this in scaling gender-responsive initiatives?
Thank you. Jeanette, we really need to talk after. So, in terms of partnerships, I think what is super important is to have in mind that businesses can and will invest in their supply chain. And as I've mentioned, investing in women is directly investing in business resilience, business productivity. So that's why we're doing it alongside the responsibility part. But we cannot do it alone, and it's important to have the right partners. And I think that's also why people gather in COPs. In the end, it's together with all those people all around the world who essentially want to advance towards the same goal, but we need each other's input, knowledge, expertise to go together. In terms of the partners that Danone works with on these topics, so we work with the philanthropic partners like the Gates Foundation, who have a whole program around women empowerment. So, for example, we are working with them on when we design our projects, how we can include women, like on being at the center of those projects. And we also work with banks to have microcredits and ensure that they can get access to financing. So, for example, in Morocco, We are working with one of the local banks to get credit for our farmers, including women. We are working also with international organizations like the FAO, so I was mentioning their reports, but beyond the report, they are key to give us knowledge, but also do movements building so that we can be with other companies who want to essentially do the same thing. For example, 2 years ago, we were in the same room as PepsiCo to discuss this topic together. And of course, the local partners, so I mentioned the local bank, but local partners to really understand the cultural norms that are there so that we do it in the right way and we don't necessarily
That's super important. Very important that you can bring aboard all these bodies. Yes, Bronson, I would like to know, in terms of global trade, investment frameworks, climate finance mechanisms, how do you think all this can come to play at the intersection of stronger gender considerations?
I still have to insist, we have to be objective. Don't just look at financing programs or entities or organizations because we're just doing development. I mean, I have a colleague, like let's see, I think I'll introduce you to two women who are having key problem right now in terms of finance. We need, we need to have more finance focus towards women-oriented organization. And one of the models actually we borrowed from Jeanette is, as much we are development partner, we're getting money with the local government, county government. We tend to help women form their own CBOs group, their own organizations, so that they can also receive funding. But also in terms of funding, it goes beyond that, where we need organization, of course, like what she runs, to come with certifications and give credibility to these women-based organizations. Sometimes they lack that capacity to come in and to receive finance. And I can see some funders are changing, which is quite good, but it's not really enough yet. As I said, 90% of farmers in Africa are women, but 90% of the farmland they farm is owned by men. There's a huge problem right now which needs to be resolved. And how do we resolve it? We need to have tailored finance scheme towards women. Be objective. Don't let's just
A round of
say
applause for
everything.
that.
We need to be objective. Yeah. Thank you. I'll leave it at that.
All right. Jeanette, any last words? He said everything.
I will echo what he said. We need targeted finance for women.
Yeah, coming from a man that's super rich. Yes. I'd like to wrap up. Any last words? I'd like to hear from you, Emans, first. What is one key action that you think we must take all together to make sure that supply chains are truly responsive and climate resilient?
That's a big question, but keeping it to the gender lens, I think one thing that we really want to keep within the way we design our projects at Danone when we want to make them more sustainable is to have this gender lens around how do we empower women within those supply chains, because in the end it empowers the whole community. So that would be the main thing. It's continuing to have this like women and gender lens in the way we design our projects and our supply chain.
Yeah, for me, I would say is, I mean, these end of stories. You don't need more storytelling. What do I mean by that? As she said, people saying I've impacted 10,000 women, 20,000. There is no means of verification. We need to move to a standard way of verifying impact around the society, around the economy, whichever way that is gender focused towards women. That's what I would say, because when we talk about carbon credits, you don't just show up and say, oh, we've sequenced 10,000 sequences. It has to be verified. And we need to move from storytelling to actual verification of this information towards gender focused towards women, actually impacts that we have in the society. Thank you.
Can I just support again what my fellow speakers said? And I think the answer to this is outcome-based financing, right? We measure outcomes. We don't just count the number of women. We measure outcomes and we base financial payments on that. That, I think, is an answer. But I also just want to support everything else my fellow speakers have said.
It's been a super amazing panel, and I'd like to thank you all for your input. Do we have last questions? Any questions? Last ones? Oh, okay, we have none. So I'd like to thank you all. This discussion has really opened my mind's eye to understand that this is not only about equity. It's not only about equity, but food systems across the world reminds us of climate resilience and also the fact that it's a sustainable growth up to the very top. So you've been an amazing panel, and I'd like to thank the World Green Economy Organization for organizing this amazing panel. It's been amazing. I'm Yvette once again from Ghana, and we'd like to have to take a group picture before we step down. Thank you. Can we all come around for a group photo? Can we please come? Can we all come around? You've been an amazing audience.